Hey guys, it's KJ from the Scariest Movie Ever channel on YouTube. I don't know about you, but it often feels like to me that time is speeding up. I sometimes wonder if everything's speeding up as the end of time approaches. The German philosopher Hegel knew that just because men and women learned from the past, that didn't mean they'd make better decisions about the future. He once cynically commented, "What experience and history teach us is this, that people and governments never have learned anything from history or acted on principles deduced from it." There are several phases that every empire goes through before it's fallen, before it's destroyed. So I wanted to take a look at a few of those in reference to America today. Clearly, America's present lone superpower status is being increasingly challenged. Could it be lost completely? While it clings to a general preeminence right now, could America still decline and fall? And didn't that happen to other great empires in the past, such as those of Britain, Spain, Rome, Persia, Babylon, and Egypt? Is America's future more secure than theirs was? Sir John Bagot Glubb, a highly honored British general and historian better known as Glubb Pasha, wrote about the collapsed empires of the past. In his 1978 book, The Fate of Empires and the Search for Survival, he described a common pattern fitting the history of some fallen empires. They went through a cycle of stages as they started, expanded, matured, declined, and then eventually collapsed. Does this pattern apply to America today? Has the United States entered this cycle's ending stages? If so, shouldn't Americans critically examine the current state of their culture to see what would be done to prevent the same grim fate of other empires? By knowing history better, we can better project our likely national futures. As the great British Prime Minister and noted historian Winston Churchill once observed, "The farther backward you can look, the farther forward you're likely to see." Glubb Pasha learned that different empires had similar cultural changes while experiencing a life cycle in a series of stages that could overlap. He generalized about empires having 7 stages of development, identifying these successive ages as follows. The first stage was considered the Age of Outburst, or the Age of the Pioneers. The second age is the Age of Conquests. The third stage was the Age of Commerce. The fourth stage was known as the Age of Affluence. The fifth stage was the Age of Intellect. And from the Age of Intellect we go to number 6, which is the Age of Decadence. And then the 7th and final stage is the Age of Decline and Collapse. Each stage helps progression to the next, as the values of the people will change over time. Military, political, economic, and even religious developments all influence an empire's people to act and believe differently over time. So let's look at some of these stages in a little more detail. So in the beginning we have the rise of the empire. It's the first stages. In the first 2 stages, or ages, the warrior's adventuresome and manly values drive an empire to gain power as it conquers land from others. Later on, during the following ages of commerce and affluence, businessmen and merchants who normally value material success and dislike taking unnecessary risks take over at the highest levels of society. And it's also worth noting that the societies of businessmen and merchants throughout history always downplayed the values of the soldiers before them. And according to Glubb, they normally did this not out of motives of conscience, but rather because of the weakening of a sense of duty in the citizens, and the increase in selfishness manifested in the desire for wealth and ease. During these middle stages, empires stopped taking more land and they start building walls instead. They switch from the offensive to the defensive. Historical examples include the wall built near the Scottish border by the Roman Emperor Hadrian, the Great Wall of China, of course, constructed to keep out intrusion by certain nomadic groups, and even 20th century France's Maginot Line, placed along the German border, just to name a few. Conquest and then later business investment promoted by the empire's unity builds the wealth that leads to the Age of Intellect. Even the brutal Mongol Empire, by bringing most of Asia under its rule, encouraged the caravan trade along Eurasia's famed Silk Road. During this fifth stage, the empire's leaders spend lots of money to establish educational institutions resembling modern universities and high schools today. It's during the Age of Intellect that schools may produce skeptical intellectuals who oppose the values and religious beliefs of their empire's early leaders. This is usually the cycle where the empires begin to take a turn. For example, the medieval Muslim philosophers Avicenna and Averroes, by accepting much of ancient Greek philosophy, were no longer actually orthodox in their beliefs. Scholars also might manage schools that teach the ruling class and/or some of the average people subjects that are either mainly oriented towards financial success or are simply impractical. For example, in the early Roman Republic, students received a basic education that stressed character development and virtue. But in the later Roman Empire, teachers taught rhetoric, or the art of speaking, when emotionally persuading assemblies was no longer of political or practical value. The corrosive effects of material success encouraged the upper class and the common people to discard the self-confident, self-disciplined values that helped to create the empire in the first place. And then the empire eventually collapses. Perhaps an outside power, such as the so-called barbarians in Rome's case, wipes it out. Or maybe an energetic internal force, such as the pro-capitalist reformers in the Soviet Union, finishes the job instead. The growth of wealth and comfort clearly can undermine the values of character, such as self-sacrifice and discipline, that led to a given empire's creation in the first place. And then the empire so affected by moral decline grows weaker and more vulnerable to destruction by forces arising inside or sometimes outside of it. Not surprisingly, God in the Bible specifically warned the ancient Israelites against departing from worshiping Him once they became materially satisfied after entering the Promised Land. He understood this human tendency. So the question is, has the United States entered the latter phases of this empire life cycle? True, it's only been independent from Britain for somewhat over 2 centuries. It's a young country still compared to those of Europe or Asia. But does America today have the same values or cultural developments that past empires such as Rome had before they fell? For example, who are the nation's heroes? What does a people's choice of heroes tell us about the people themselves? Today in America, the people generally admired above all and perpetually gossiped about are celebrities such as sports stars, singers, actors, and musicians. As Glubb explains, the heroes of an empire's people change over time as their values do. Soldiers, builders, pioneers, and explorers are admired in the initial stages of the empire life cycle. But then successful businessmen and entrepreneurs are esteemed during the ages of commerce and affluence. For example, late 19th century middle-class Americans wanted their children to learn the values of prudence, saving, and foresight, as found in the stories of author Horatio Alger, whose heroes led exemplary lives striving to succeed in the face of adversity and poverty. Intellectuals are also increasingly respected during the Age of Intellect. And during the last stages of decadence and decline, an empire's people often think most highly of and imitate athletes, musicians, and actors, despite how corrupt these celebrities' private lives really are. Remarkably, according to Glubb Pasha, in 10th century Baghdad during the Muslim Abbasid Empire's decline, its writers complained about the singers of love songs having a bad influence on the young people. It's very interesting. It seems the old adage is true. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Because people grow emotionally attached to the music they love, they have a high regard for its singers, and they want to emulate them. Inevitably, popular music's often spiritually rotten lyrical content, such as foul language, blunt sexual references, glorifying immorality, and even satanic allusions at times, influence the fans. Furthermore, the immoral lifestyles of many musicians often including drug abuse and promiscuous sex, also have an impact on our society. So let's take a look at some of the key signs of decline. What are some common features of an empire's culture in its declining period? Glubb describes developments such as these. Number 1, rampant sexual immorality, an aversion to marriage in favor of living together, and an increased divorce rate all combine to undermine family stability. And keep in mind that this pertains to empires throughout history, not just America today. This happened among the upper class in the late Roman Republic and early empire. The first-century writer Seneca once complained about Roman upper-class women, saying that they divorce in order to remarry and they marry in order to divorce. The birth rate declines at this point, and infanticide increases as family size is deliberately limited. The historian W.H. McNeill has referred to the biological death of the Roman upper class as one of the main reasons for Rome's decline. He stated that homosexuality became publicly acceptable and it spread throughout the land, as was the case among the ancient Greeks before Rome conquered them. So considering this first sign of an empire's decline, there's a few clips I wanted to share with you. Check this out.
Everybody knows what a swinger is, right?
Yep.
But have you heard of a Christian swinger?
Nope.
A Florida couple, of course it's Florida, who are devout Christians, say they wanted to get a bit creative about where they preach. Because they are also swingers, they thought, why not preach some gospel while we,
God's not going to put a line with a bunch of elephants. So what's he going to do? He's going to put a swinger with a bunch of swingers to spread his word. Simple as that.
You two are married, and you sleep together. You two are dating, and sleep together. You two are dating, and sleep together. And you two are dating, and sleep together.
Yeah.
How is this not awkward? This is Ashley. She's 9 years old. Her family is polyamorous. How about you draw your family, and I'm going to draw my family.
Okay.
Okay?
If somebody said, describe your family to me, I would say, there's 2 dads, 1 mom, and 1 person dating another person.
It's a lot to keep track of.
Not really.
Her parents, Billy and Melissa, have been married 17 years.
Yay.
6 years ago, Melissa started dating Jeremy. They all lived together outside of Atlanta.
If you had to explain it to someone who had absolutely no context, what is being poly?
More laundry.
Yeah, it's being open to the idea that you don't have to have just that one, that you can accept more people into your life.
Billy's dating too.
Hey!
This is Lindsay, his girlfriend of 9 months. Lindsay lives with her boyfriend Brian in another house. What about Lindsay? Are you going to draw Lindsay too?
Probably.
Yeah?
On this side, with Daddy, she practically is a part of our family.
You know, there are several great data points, both soft and hard, but perhaps the most important report this month so far has come from the housing starts report. Now, the starts themselves are robust, but the best part of that report was a 6.5% surge in single-family housing starts. That's the highest level in almost a decade. I happen to be a major proponent of traditional family formation being the most important long-term driver of the economy, and there's exhaustive data that backs that up. In fact, on average, they say married men earn about $15,000 more per year than their single counterparts. But the benefits are even deeper than that when you talk about the entire family. An Ohio State study, in fact, showed that after 10 years, a married couple, on average, will have a net worth of $43,000, while single folks only $11,000. And as far as the kids, you know, they do so much better. You have less income inequality, lower median income pay, lower labor participation. The children in married households have lower rates of poverty, greater rates of high school graduation. They delay pregnancy until they're married and are much less likely to become involved in crime. Now, the problem, of course, is marriage has fizzled out, and it's brought negative consequences along with it. So if we can reverse that slowdown, particularly in birth rates, well, of course, we need to get marriage up first, and it's going to have to start with young people. Think about this. Back in 1950, the average age of grooms was 22.8 years. Brides were just barely 20 years old. In 2015, those numbers surged up to 29.2 and 27 years old, respectively. Now, I'm not sure how or when we change this, other than some sort of social renaissance. If fashion, though, are like bell-bottom jeans, cyclical, then maybe they'll be cool again. Maybe the notion of marriage and children will come back in vogue. I'm not sure, but I think it's got to happen. Joining me now to discuss, Kirsten Hagelin and Peter Marisi. Peter, you're hanging out with those kids at the university. Tell them to get married and have a family.
You want to get me fired? The reality is that with the advent of career women, there's this desire to get established and to have a career and so forth. But, there's nothing that drives prosperity like people getting married and having children. Because when you have children, you simply try harder because you have to educate them and provide for them. And you also worry about their future. Likewise, when two people are married and they're working together, they just make better decisions, and the children profit from those decisions. There's so many ways in which marriage, works. But, nothing creates an economic boom like a baby boom, because people run out and they buy cribs and bathinettes and all the rest. And that would solve our aggregate demand problem pretty easily.
Yeah.
If the birth rate, if people started aiming at having 3 children instead of 2, we'd have a much larger middle class, we'd have a much better educated labor force, and Lord knows this economy would be ripping at 3 or 4%. Forget about all that budget stuff. If everybody had 3 kids instead of 2, this economy would take off.
Despite the hashtag #MeToo movement, Hollywood is taking its debauchery and debasement of American culture to a new level. The entertainment industry is a primary influencer of American culture, and psychiatrists say children often mimic what they hear and see on television and in movies. Now, I was astonished recently when I saw this online video of Desmond.
I put on some lip balm and that's when it began. You can do whatever you want with it, no matter what. Even if it looks like a disaster, just go out with it and it'll look fabulous. This look is a deconstructed Wonder Woman look.
Desmond says he was first exposed to dressing up in drag when he saw a RuPaul performance on TV. To Desmond's parents, I say this: your son seems like a wonderful child, a good kid, but really? A drag queen at age 10? A 10-year-old doesn't have a mature understanding of sex. He's a child. At the Academy Award ceremonies this year, an Oscar was awarded to the film Call Me By Your Name. It received the award for Best Adapted Screenplay. The movie's about an affair between a 17-year-old named Elio and a 24-year-old man, Oliver. The movie's described as an exploration of desire and power of impulses toward one another. The director said the story was about 2 boys who grow in the film. Boys? Really? You mean a 17-year-old minor, a child, and a 24-year-old man, an adult?
Nature has cunning ways of finding our weakest spot.
The second key sign of an empire's decline is that many foreign immigrants settle in the empire's capital and their major cities. This mixture of ethnic groups in close proximity in these cosmopolitan places inevitably produce conflicts. Because of their prominent locations within the empire, their influence greatly exceeds their percentage of the population, and here diversity plainly leads to divisiveness. The third key factor in an empire's fall is both irresponsible pleasure-seeking and pessimism increase among the people and their leaders. The spirit described in 1 Corinthians 15:32 spreads throughout society. It says, "Let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die." As people cynically give up looking for solutions to the problems of life and society, they eventually drop out of the system. They then turn to mindless entertainment, to luxuries and sexual activity, and to drugs or alcohol as well. The astonishingly corrupt and lavish parties of the Roman Empire's elite are a case in point. The Emperor Nero, for instance, would spend the modern equivalent of $500,000 for just the flowers at some of their banquets. And then the fourth key sign of an empire's demise is the government provides extensive welfare for the poor. In the case of the city of Rome, which had perhaps 1.2 million people around AD 170, government provided bread and circuses, or food and entertainment, which helped to keep the masses content. About 1/2 of its non-slave population was on the dole at least part of the year. And of course it's true that helping the poor shows real Christian compassion, but such help can also lead to laziness and dependency. These problems are especially likely when the poor believe state-provided charity is a permanent right or entitlement. So considering these factors and considering this list of indicators of an empire's cultural and moral decline, is it reasonable to deny that the United States has entered the stages of decadence and decline? True, the tidal wave of social and cultural decay unleashed by the 1960s in America has ebbed some in recent years. The rates of abortion, divorce, illegitimate births, drug abuse, welfare dependency, and violent crime have either declined or gone up much more slowly. Furthermore, some indicators of decline have good, not just bad results. For instance, some immigration is helpful. As skilled, educated immigrants arrive, they normally benefit America economically while being a brain drain from third world countries. And indeed, the United States has historically embraced vast numbers of immigrants. Nevertheless, the present flood of immigrants, legal or illegal, equals in impact the wave that arrived at America's shores around 1900. Today they are far more apt to be a divisive force. And why is that? Well, unlike 100 years ago, America's intellectual elite overall has adopted multiculturalism now, the promotion of immigrants maintaining their prior distinct cultures, and they've rejected assimilation, which of course means adopting the existing national culture. And this has been a globalist plan for a very long time. Today, multiculturalism is the ideology underlying a potentially ultimate political balkanization wherein society is fragmented along ethnic and cultural lines. A lack of cultural unity inevitably leads to conflict in a free society such as in the United States. So how should we react to the historical insights of Sir John Glubb Pasha's The Fate of Empires and the Search for Survival as they relate to America today, Britain, and other related English-speaking nations? As he notes in his examination of a number of previous empires, the processes of history often repeat themselves. We shouldn't believe that America will automatically avoid the fate of other great empires that declined and fell in the past. God is ever so merciful, but I believe his patience in the face of our national sins is wearing thin. There are millions of people all around the world, I believe, that are watchmen and watchwomen, and they see what's coming and they're trying to warn the others. And on that note, this concludes everything I wanted to show you and share with you. I truly believe that if enough people in this world turned back to God, that we could change this reality. And the question is, will people change? Will people turn back to God? Only time will tell. But until then, thanks again for watching the video. Take care of yourselves out there, okay? And I'll talk to you a little later.